Hello, my name is Philip Ward, 32 years old. I am currently the Chief Operating Officer for the West Coast Division of Ward Industries, the conglomerate founded by my father, Alexander Ward. That day, I was sitting on the 47th floor of the Ward Industries Tower, in the middle of the quarterly shareholders meeting that everyone knew was absolutely critical to the company's future. I had just finished presenting the report on the West Coast Division's performance when the phone in my suit pocket suddenly started vibrating incessantly. The screen showed a completely unfamiliar number. Normally, in meetings like this, I would silence it immediately and continue. But that day, a strange premonition made me press the answer button instead of reject. Hello? Is this Philip Ward? A man's voice came from the other end, dry, urgent, and filled with anxiety. This is the on-duty emergency physician at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Your father, Mr. Alexander Ward, has just been brought in critical condition following a serious traffic accident. You should come immediately so we can update you in person. The world around me suddenly went silent, as if someone had muted all sound. The serious faces of the shareholders in the boardroom blurred strangely. The heated discussions about quarterly revenue and market expansion plans turned into distant, meaningless buzzing. I felt the ground slowly but surely collapsing beneath my feet. My father, how is he, doctor? I asked immediately, my voice hoarse and trembling, almost no longer sounding like my own. We are doing everything we can to stabilize him, the doctor replied gravely. Please come right away. I don't even remember how I left the meeting room. All I know is that I sprinted down the endlessly long corridor of the building, rushed into the elevator, and frantically pressed the basement button as if that would make it descend faster. As my car shot out of the underground garage, I floored the accelerator and raced onto the freeway toward downtown Los Angeles. The golden afternoon sunlight poured through the windshield. But to me at that moment, everything was just a heavy, despairing shade of gray. Alexander Ward, my father, was the only family I had left in this world. At 63, he was the founder of Ward Industries, a vast empire spanning luxury real estate across Los Angeles, renewable energy, and heavy industry. To outsiders, he was a stern billionaire who adhered to ironclad principles and maintained ruthlessly transparent business ethics. But to me, he was the most loving father I had ever known. The one who had sacrificed his entire life to fill the enormous void left by my mother after she passed away. I couldn't imagine life without him. Cedars-Sinai Hospital loomed before me like a cold, soulless white concrete block. I parked right in front of the emergency entrance, completely ignoring the security guard shouting after me for parking illegally. I burst through the automatic doors and ran down the stark white corridor that reeked of antiseptic. A nurse almost collided with me as I sharply turned a corner. Alexander Ward. Where is he? I practically shouted at her. She pointed toward the end of the hallway and said quickly, Emergency room at the very end. Just run straight. I charged forward, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. Through the small glass window in the emergency room door, I saw my father lying motionless on the bed, surrounded by a tangle of machines and wires, blood staining the thin hospital gown. His face was as pale as paper, eyes tightly shut, head wrapped in thick bandages. I stood frozen outside the door, my hands clenched into fists so tightly that my nails dug deep into my palms without me noticing. Just as my mind was in complete turmoil, the waiting room door swung open and an overpowering scent of expensive perfume hit me even before I could turn around. Vivian, my stepmother, entered the waiting room with her usual haughty demeanor, a black silk dress clinging to her body, high heels clicking sharply on the cold tile floor, hair neatly pulled into a high bun, and bright red lipstick. At 47, she was sharp, fiercely ambitious, and always needed to control everything around her. Clinging close beside her was Miles, my 11-year-old stepbrother, his face pale, gripping his mother's hand tightly as if afraid of being abandoned in this unfamiliar place. Vivian didn't look at me at first. She stopped in front of the glass window, her eyes scanning my father's motionless body as if inspecting a badly damaged piece of furniture. Not a single tear, not a frown, not the slightest trace of emotion on her face. "Philip," She spoke first, her voice ice cold. "You just arrived too?" I nodded, unable to speak. My throat was so tight it was hard to breathe. The waiting time dragged on like endless torture. Every minute felt like a century. I paced back and forth in the corridor, never taking my eyes off the emergency room door for even a second. Finally, the door opened. The doctor stepped out, his face exhausted, mask pulled down to his chin, sweat dripping from his forehead. He looked at us and let out a deep, heavy sigh. "Are you the family of Mr. Alexander Ward?" he asked. I rushed right up to him. "I'm his son. How is my father now, doctor?" The doctor looked me straight in the eyes and said slowly, "We've done everything possible to stabilize him. His life has been temporarily preserved, but the situation remains extremely critical. He has fallen into a deep coma. His eyes are open and staring but show no response whatsoever. His whole body is rigid and there are no signs of consciousness. Based on what we're seeing right now, we believe he has entered a persistent vegetative state." Persistent vegetative state. Those 4 words hit me like a sledgehammer. I staggered, barely catching myself against the wall, my mind spinning, everything around me going blurry. "No, that can't be," I muttered, voice shaking. My father was perfectly healthy. Just yesterday he called me, his voice was still strong. "There has to be some way, doctor." The doctor gently shook his head, his voice lowering. "We truly did everything we could. Some patients do wake up, but in his case, it's very bad. At the moment, he shows virtually no signs of awareness or response." I was still reeling, struggling to process the news when Vivian spoke up. Her voice was completely calm, without the slightest tremor. "Doctor, how long will he remain in this condition?" The doctor hesitated for a moment before answering. "It could be a few weeks, a few months, or possibly much longer. We can't say for certain yet." Vivian nodded, her lips pressing together as if calculating something in her head. Then she glanced at me, a sharp, probing look as if gauging how I would react to this news. A chill ran down my spine. She hadn't asked whether my father would ever wake up. She had only asked how long we would have to wait. And that look in her eyes wasn't the look of a grieving wife. It was the look of someone already planning their next moves. I looked at Vivian, at Miles trembling and huddled against his mother, at my father lying motionless behind the glass. And for the first time, I felt true fear. Not just fear of losing my father, but fear that this might not have been a simple accident. The days that followed passed in a strange, repetitive loop. Meetings at the company, signing documents, forcing smiles for shareholders, then racing straight back to Cedars-Sinai. I practically lived in the ICU. Every evening after the last nursing shift change, I dragged the worn padded chair right up to my father's bed, took his ice-cold, motionless hand in mine, and whispered everything under the sun. I told him about the nearly completed solar energy project in the Mojave Desert, about the new guy in marketing who kept spilling coffee on the conference table, about how I still hadn't found a permanent parking spot in the new building. I talked nonstop, hoping my voice could somehow slip into whatever deep place he was trapped in and pull him back. He just lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, the ventilator hissing steadily. Not a blink, not a squeeze of the hand. But I kept talking, because I was terrified of silence. 3 days after the accident, I was sitting by his bed when the door flew open without a knock. Vivian walked in with her usual impeccable appearance. Cream-colored Chanel suit, pointed Louboutin heels, hair in a flawless high bun. I stood up instantly. Instinct told me something bad was coming. "You're already here," Vivian said lightly but coldly, as if we'd just run into each other in a hotel lobby instead of an ICU room. "Good. I need to discuss something important with you. Right now." I glanced at my father, then back at her. "What's so urgent it can't wait?" Vivian didn't answer immediately. She walked to the bedside, bent down, and studied Alexander for a long moment, as if appraising a broken statue. Then she turned to me, her lips curving into a smile I couldn't quite call sad. "Philip, we should start preparing the inheritance management plan," she said in the same tone she might use to discuss next month's board meeting schedule. Your father is like this now, and no one knows how long it will last. We need to talk about dividing shares, transferring control of Ward Industries, and the trusts before everything gets complicated. My ears started ringing. My father was still breathing. His eyes were still open. He was right here, and she was already talking about dividing his estate as if he were in a coffin. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice dropping so low I barely recognized it. "My father is still alive." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Exactly. And we need to act while he's still alive. The lawyers say that if Alexander doesn't wake up within 6 months, we'll have to petition the court to appoint a financial guardian. Better to be proactive than let outsiders get involved." "I refuse to discuss this," I said slowly, each word deliberate and firm. Vivian pressed her lips together. For the first time, I saw her composure crack, if only for a second. "Philip, don't be childish. This is family responsibility. Think it over." With that, she turned and walked out, high heels clicking sharply on the floor without once asking about my father's condition. I collapsed back into the chair, still clutching his hand. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I thought things would calm down so I could focus on caring for him, but just 4 days later, Vivian returned. That day she was dressed head to toe in black, as if attending a funeral. Only the funeral wreath was missing. She placed her Hermes bag on the chair, pulled out a thick stack of documents and set it on the small table beside the bed. "Alexander's assets should be divided fairly into 3 parts, she stated without greeting. "Mine, yours, and Miles's. You'll retain operational control of the company during the transition period, but voting shares must be clearly transferred. I've already had the lawyers prepare the paperwork. You just need to sign." I stared at the documents like they were a venomous snake. "Mom, Dad is still alive," I repeated, my voice now trembling with anger. Vivian sighed, as if I were a child refusing to understand. She sat down opposite me and crossed her legs. "Philip, look at your father. He spent his life proud, powerful, and commanding. Do you think he'd want to live like this? Machines breathing for him, nurses cleaning him, unable to speak or move. That's not living. That's torture." I felt the blood rush to my head. She continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Withdrawing life support would be the most humane thing we could do for him. He would go peacefully. Then we could give him the grand funeral he deserves, and the family could move on." I shot to my feet. The chair crashed backward. "Get out of here right now," I roared, losing control in front of her for the first time in my life. "Never set foot in this room again if you ever mention pulling the plug again. My father is alive. He can hear everything. Do you hear me?" Vivian didn't flinch. She just looked at me, then gave a faint, disdainful, utterly arrogant little smile. "You'll regret clinging to false hope, Philip," she said softly, but her words cut like a blade. "Time is not on your side." She stood, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back one last time. "I'll give you a few days to think it over. Don't let this go too far." When the door closed, I was shaking so hard I had to grip the bed rail to stay upright. I turned back to my father. His eyes were still staring blankly, but I swear I saw a glint of moisture at the corner of one eye, like a tiny tear catching the light. I sat down and pressed my forehead against the back of his hand. "I'm sorry, Dad," I whispered. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Never." I sat there in the ICU beneath the cold white glow of fluorescent lights and the relentless mechanical hiss of the ventilator, a cruel reminder that he was still alive, but only just. My father's hand rested in both of mine, icy, rigid, offering no answering squeeze. I gripped it tighter, as though if I held hard enough I could summon back the familiar warmth from years ago, the warmth that used to flood through me whenever he pulled me into one of his crushing hugs. Tears welled at the corners of my eyes, but I clenched my jaw and forced them back. I was not allowed to cry. Not yet. I had to be strong for him, for both of us. Then, like a sudden wave, childhood memories crashed over me without warning. I saw myself again as an 8-year-old boy standing outside the gates of my private school in Brentwood. backpack weighing down my shoulders, eyes scanning the street for Dad's gleaming black Bentley. He was always on time, no matter how many meetings he had, no matter which partners from Dubai or London were waiting. He'd step out of the car, tall and imposing in his perfectly tailored suit, his smile melting even the harsh Los Angeles afternoon sun. "What fun things did you learn today, son? Tell your old man," he'd say, ruffling my hair so hard it turned into a bird's nest. Then he'd drive us to Santa Monica Beach, park in our usual spot. And we'd walk the weathered wooden boardwalk side by side, the ocean breeze flapping his shirt. We'd buy 2 huge vanilla ice cream cones, sit on the faded bench and watch the waves roll in while the ice cream melted down our hands. I'd laugh because I was sticky and messy. He'd laugh louder, wipe me clean with a napkin and tell me about the days when he had nothing, sleeping under freeway bridges downtown, dreaming of building an empire. "So you'll never have to bow your head to anyone, Philip." I'd nod furiously, mouth smeared with vanilla, not fully understanding but feeling inexplicably proud. Mom was always waiting at home. Caroline Ward, the gentlest woman I've ever known, and probably ever will. Golden hair that caught the sunlight, a smile as warm as spring morning, and a voice soft as feathers. The moment I got home from school, I'd run straight to the kitchen. She'd open her arms wide, pull me into the scent of her perfume mixed with freshly baked cookies and ask, "Did my boy have a good day?" Then she'd sit down, draw me onto her lap and listen patiently while I babbled about friends and perfect math scores. At night, she read me fairy tales, stroking my hair until I drifted off. Dad would sit in the armchair nearby, pretending to read the paper, but I'd catch him stealing glances at us, a quiet, blissful smile on his face. Life back then was a flawless painting. Dad, the vast sky that sheltered us, Mom, the gentle earth that nurtured us, and me, the child loved unconditionally in the middle. I thought it would last forever, that we would always be that way. But when I turned 12, tragedy struck without warning. It started with fleeting headaches. Mom brushed them off with a smile. "I'm just tired, probably the weather." Then she began losing weight rapidly. Her eyes sank, her skin turned pallid. The doctors said malignant brain tumor, late stage. Everything happened at dizzying speed, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I still remember racing after her down hospital corridors, clutching her hand through the thin gown, and how she still managed to smile. "You have to be strong and take care of Dad for me, Philip," she whispered that final afternoon, her voice barely more than breath. I nodded, tears streaming, not understanding those were her last words. Mom left us on an autumn morning when I was 12, as the maple leaves outside Cedars-Sinai turned blood red. That was when my father completely broke. The man I'd always believed invincible, the man who could face the cutthroat business world without flinching, suddenly trembled like a withered leaf. He sat beside Mom's coffin all night, neither eating nor sleeping, silently holding her hand, eyes red but never shedding a tear in front of anyone. The sprawling Holmby Hills mansion, once filled with laughter and the smell of baking, became cold and terrifyingly silent. Dinners were just the two of us staring at each other across the table in silence, Dad looking at his untouched plate. He threw himself into work like a man fleeing himself, meetings from dawn till midnight, flying everywhere to sign billion-dollar deals. Anything to avoid coming home to the gaping void Mom had left. Yet no matter how shattered he was, he never once abandoned me. Despite his crushing schedule, he was there for every important moment of my life. On my 13th birthday, he canceled a critical flight to New York and drove through the night just to cut the cake with me. When I won the Academic Excellence Award, he stood in the front row of the auditorium, eyes glistening, clapping loudest of all. On nights I woke crying from dreams of Mom, he would quietly enter my room, lie down beside me, hold me tight, and whisper, "I'm here, son. I'll always be here." He taught me everything. How to hold a knife and fork the proper European way. How to read the Wall Street Journal cover to cover. How to tell a good Bordeaux, but above all, how to live with integrity. Money can vanish in an instant. Power can be taken at any moment, but character and honor, no one can ever take those from you, Philip, he'd say, his voice deep and warm like the night ocean. For all those years when I needed a mother most, he was both father and mother to me. He was my only anchor in the storm. Then one day, when I was 24 and had just graduated with honors from Stanford, Dad called me home for dinner. His voice hesitated over the phone. "I want you to meet someone important." I arrived to find Vivian seated at the walnut dining table, smiling perfectly, 3-year-old Miles hiding behind her. Dad introduced them, and for the first time in years, I saw a spark in his eyes. I gave them my blessing sincerely. Because I had seen him alone for far too long, he deserved at least a little happiness again. I moved out on my own to a penthouse in West Hollywood so I wouldn't disturb Dad's new family. In truth, it was to escape Vivian's cold glances, though she never said it outright. I still visited often, still worked side by side with Dad at Ward Industries, still his trusted right hand in every major deal. We kept our bond strong, just the two of us, as if Vivian and Miles were merely faint shadows in the background. But now, watching Dad lie motionless on the hospital bed, body rigid as stone, eyes staring blankly into nothingness, I finally understood a painful truth. He had only me left, and I had only him. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. I bowed my head, pressed my face against the back of his weathered, papery hand, letting hot tears soak into his skin. I wept silently, shoulders shaking in the dim hospital room, every beautiful memory now a sharp blade cutting into my heart. I remembered our last hug before the accident, remembered his quiet chuckle over the phone. "Come home for dinner tonight, son. I have something important to tell you, just the two of us." I remembered everything, and I was terrified that if he left now, I would have nothing left to hold on to. "Dad, what do I do now?" I whispered, voice breaking in my parched throat. "Please don't leave me. I'm not as strong as you think. I'm still that little boy who needs you to hold him every night." There was no response, only the steady hiss of the ventilator and the monotonous beep of the heart monitor. Yet in that moment of deepest despair, a strange strength surged from the depths of my chest. The tears didn't weaken me. They washed away the fear, leaving behind a burning resolve nothing could extinguish. I wiped my face with my sleeve, sat up straight, and gripped his hand even tighter, as if pouring my own life into him. I would not let him go. No matter what Vivian was plotting, no matter what tricks she pulled, I would protect him at any cost. I would keep him alive, even if only by these cold machines. I would fight the battles he could not fight right now. I would stand against anyone trying to push him into darkness. Because he had sacrificed his whole life for me. Now it was my turn to repay him. I leaned down and kissed his forehead, a long kiss soaked with tears, then whispered into his ear, "I'm bringing you home, Dad. I swear on my honor. Just rest now. When you wake up, everything will be all right." Outside the window, Los Angeles began to glitter with night lights. But I knew I wouldn't sleep tonight. I would stay awake, holding his hand, waiting for dawn. Because as long as dawn still brought my father, I still had the entire world. The following days passed in a relentless chain of tension. I had barely begun to process my fear for my father's condition when the arguments over his will, his assets, and the future of the family flared up like a wildfire. Vivian sent lawyers, handwritten letters, even long text messages dripping with feigned concern. I didn't reply to a single one. I simply stayed at the hospital, growing thinner by the day, dark circles under my eyes, but never leaving his side for a moment. Then one Friday afternoon, as slanted golden-orange sunlight filtered through the ICU blinds, Vivian walked in accompanied by Dr. Harlan, the head of neurology, an older man I had always respected for his caution. "Dr. Harlan," Vivian said in a saccharine voice that made my skin crawl, "I'd like us to reconsider together the option of letting Mr. Alexander go peacefully. The family has suffered long enough, and I truly believe prolonging this is only causing him more pain." Dr. Harlan adjusted his glasses and gave me a look full of sympathy before answering. "Mrs. Ward, we strictly follow medical ethics protocols." Withdrawing life support and terminating care can only be done with the unanimous consent of the entire family and approval from the hospital ethics board. At present, Mr. Alexander remains stable. I shot up from my chair, blood rushing to my head so fast my ears rang. "There will be no withdrawal of life support," I nearly shouted, voice hoarse and shaking. "My father is alive. He hasn't said goodbye to me. He hasn't let go. You have no right to decide for him." Vivian whipped around to face me. For the first time, I saw her truly lose composure. Her eyes blazed, her voice sharp as a blade. "I am Alexander's legal wife. I have medical power of attorney that he signed 8 years ago, and you're just a son letting emotion cloud his judgment. You'd better watch yourself, Philip, unless you want all of Los Angeles to know you're torturing your own father because you refuse to let him go." Every word stabbed straight into my heart. I took one step forward, planted myself in front of the bed, arms spread wide as if shielding him from the entire world. "You want reputation. You want money. You want everything. Fine. Take it. But you will not take my father's life. Any decision regarding his survival goes through me. And my answer is no. Never." The air in the room grew so thick it could have been sliced with a knife. Dr. Harlan took a step back, clearly wanting no part of this family war. Vivian stared at me, pure hatred flashing in her eyes, then spun on her heel, high heels clacking furiously as she stormed out, hurling one final sentence over her shoulder. "You will regret this." The door slammed shut. I stood there panting, then turned back to Dad. His eyes were still open, but I swear the corners were glistening more than usual. That night I stayed, as I did every night. The hospital gradually fell silent, leaving only the steady hiss of the ventilator and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. I pulled the chair right up to the bed, took his hand, rested my forehead on it, and whispered all sorts of nonsense so he wouldn't feel alone. "Dad, I fought with her again today. I'm sorry I raised my voice, but I can't let her hurt you. You have to wake up, Dad. You have to come home with me." I talked until my throat was raw, then fell silent. And then a miracle happened. I looked up and saw a tear welling in the corner of his left eye. A single crystal clear tear slowly rolled from his lashes, slid down his temple, and soaked into the white pillow. A real tear. I froze. I leaned closer, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. "Dad, can you hear me?" No other movement, but that tear was enough to ignite hope. I bent close to his ear, voice trembling. "Dad, if you can hear me, just blink twice. Just twice, okay?" I waited slowly, agonizingly slowly, but unmistakably. He blinked. Once, then twice. I nearly collapsed to the floor. Joy surged through me so violently that I started crying, but this time from pure happiness. I clutched his hand, kissed his thin fingers over and over, whispering nonstop, "I knew it. I knew you were still here. Don't be afraid, Dad. I'm taking you home." I hit the call button immediately. Dr. Harlan and 2 other neurologists rushed in, performing a battery of tests. Light stimulation, pain response, emergency MRI, EEG. 2 hours later, Dr. Harlan pulled me into the hallway, his voice shaking with astonishment. "Philip, your father is not in a vegetative state," he said slowly. "He has locked-in syndrome. That means he is completely conscious. He can hear everything, understand everything around him, but he cannot move or speak. His brain is functioning normally. Only his body refuses to respond. He is fully here, fully aware." I stood frozen in the corridor, tears streaming again, not from grief this time, but from a happiness so intense it hurt. I hugged Dr. Harlan, repeating "thank you" over and over, then ran back into the room. I closed the door, drew the curtains, and sat right beside Dad. "You heard everything, didn't you?" I whispered. 2 slow, deliberate blinks. "You heard everything Vivian said, didn't you?" 2 more blinks, slower this time, but unmistakable. I bowed my head over his hand, tears falling freely. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm sorry you had to hear all of that alone. I'm so sorry." He blinked once, slowly, gently, as if to say, It's okay. I gripped his hand tighter and whispered, "From now on, no one will hurt you again. No one. I promise." I stepped out and spoke to Dr. Harlan and the head nurse, my voice firm. "This information must remain absolutely confidential. No one is to know, not even family. If it leaks, my father's life will be in danger." They looked confused by my request at first, but eventually nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. That night, I stayed by his bedside longer than ever. The lights dimmed to sleep mode, leaving only the faint blue glow of the monitors. I held his hand tightly and quietly recounted everything that had happened since the accident. Every single detail, so he would know he had never been alone. After the night Dr. Harlan confirmed locked-in syndrome, I never saw the world the same way again. It was no longer just a suspicion. Vivian didn't merely want to speed up the inheritance process. She needed my father dead, quickly, quietly, before he ever regained the ability to communicate with the outside world. Because if he fully recovered and could speak about what he had heard and understood, her entire scheme would collapse into ruins. I didn't wait another second. I acted immediately. The next morning, I left the hospital for exactly 30 minutes, the longest I had dared to leave him alone since the day he was admitted. I drove to a security equipment store in Glendale and bought 2 wireless 4K mini cameras with night vision infrared, 7-day backup batteries, and end-to-end encrypted cloud connectivity. I paid in cash, no credit card, no receipt, no trace. On the way back, I stopped at a small electronics shop and picked up 2 extra memory cards and a high-capacity portable hard drive. When I returned, I told the head nurse I wanted to replace the old curtains because they were stained and looked unclean. I did everything myself. No one suspected a thing. I hid the first camera in the folds of the curtain directly above the head of the bed, lens pointed straight down at my father's face. The second I discreetly attached beneath the metal bed frame, angled upward to cover the entire room. I checked every blind spot and adjusted repeatedly until both cameras had perfect, unobstructed coverage. When it was done, I sat beside the bed, took his hand tightly, and whispered into his ear, "No one will ever touch you again, Dad. I promise." He blinked twice, slowly but clearly, as if answering me. From that moment on, my phone ran the surveillance app 24/7. I set emergency vibration alerts for any movement in the room outside official visiting hours. Then on the 5th night after installing the cameras, everything shattered. It was a Tuesday, 2:17 a.m. My phone vibrated frantically inside the borrowed white doctor's coat I was wearing as a disguise. I opened the screen instantly and my heart stopped. Vivian and Uncle Kai were in my father's room. Uncle Kai Ward, the man my father loved more than a blood brother, the man he had trusted completely for decades, the man he had placed in charge of Ward Industries' entire financial division for 25 years, was standing there in a long black coat and a low-pulled baseball cap, scanning the room like a professional thief. Vivian walked ahead, not even bothering to lower her voice. She sat in the chair I occupied every day, crossed her legs, and looked at my motionless father with undisguised contempt. "I can't believe he's still not dead," she said, her voice so cold it froze my spine even through the phone screen. "He's just lying there like a breathing corpse, wasting everyone's time." I thought everything had been cleanly finished that night on the Malibu highway. Kai stood beside the bed, hands in his pockets, voice calm and businesslike. "Alexander found out our secret, Vivian. Before the accident, he called me into his private office and asked point blank about the transfers to the Caymans. He had even hired private investigators to follow you. That crash was supposed to end it once and for all. Brakes cut, airbags disabled, everything was prepared perfectly. But he survived, and now Philip is guarding him too closely." Vivian gave a sharp, scornful laugh that cut like a razor. "He thinks he's protecting his father. How pathetic. What if he knew his father already knows everything?" Kai leaned closer to my father's face. I could clearly see the rage on his. "This time we have to be certain. Philip is too vigilant. He won't allow the ventilator to be removed, won't allow a transfer, won't let anyone near." We need something cleaner. 1 dose of potassium chloride into the IV line will do it. No trace, no pain, just a sudden cardiac arrest in the night. The hospital will record it as a natural complication. No one will suspect a thing. I was sitting in the on-call room 3 corridors away, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. The screen blurred with tears, not tears of sorrow, but tears of pure, molten rage. The accident hadn't been an accident. It was attempted murder. And the mastermind was Uncle Kai, the man my father had treated like his own brother, the man he had once said to my face, "If anything ever happens to me, trust Kai the way you trust me." And Vivian, the wife to whom my father had given his heart a second time, was sitting there casually discussing killing her husband like it was a weekend spa appointment. I immediately activated emergency recording, saved the video to 3 separate encrypted cloud storages, emailed a copy to a secret account, and backed it up again on the portable drive in my pocket. Every move was pure reflex. Only one thought remained in my mind: protect Dad. As painful and shocking as it was, I still didn't know what secret Kai was talking about. But I would find out, even if I had to tear hell apart to do it. When Vivian and Kai finally left, she even bent down and air-kissed my father's forehead in a final act of mockery. I was holding my breath from sheer tension. I raced back to the room, called the doctors, and had every IV line, every machine, every hanging drop inspected. Nothing had been touched. This time it had only been reconnaissance. But what about next time? I sat down beside the bed, gripped his hand so tightly I was afraid I'd hurt him, and whispered into his ear, "I heard everything, Dad. I know everything now. I won't let them hurt you again. I swear on Mom's grave I will protect you at any cost." He blinked, not twice this time, but 5 times, 6 times, as if he were crying without being able to shed tears. I pressed his hand to my cheek and let my own tears fall onto his thin, frail skin. From that moment on, I was no longer Philip Ward, COO of the West Coast Division. I became the sentinel, the shield, the predator guarding his last remaining prey. I would make them pay with the rest of their lives, because he was still alive. And as long as he was still alive, I still had a reason to fight. I didn't sleep that night. The footage from the hidden cameras kept replaying in my head like a horror film with no pause button. I sat beside Dad's bed until dawn broke, holding his hand tightly, whispering over and over that everything would be all right, even though I still had no idea how. But one thing I knew for certain: I couldn't just sit and wait for them to strike again. I had to move first. The next morning I called Marcus Hale, the private investigator my father had used a few times to vet business partners. He was discreet, reliable, and a former FBI agent. We met in a tiny coffee shop in Pasadena, not his office, no trail. I handed him the full recording from the cameras, no long explanations, just one sentence. "I need everything on Kai Ward and Vivian Ward. Everything, from 15 years ago to this very second." Marcus looked at me for a long time, then nodded. 3 days, he said. "First report in 3 days." Those 3 days felt like 3 years. I stayed at the hospital, checking every IV line, every vial of medicine, whispering to Dad every night. He answered with slow blinks, sometimes 3 in a row, our agreed signal for "you're doing the right thing." But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kai leaning over Dad's face, voice ice cold. "1 dose of potassium chloride will be enough." On the 3rd day, Marcus called. We met in the underground parking garage of an abandoned mall. He handed me a thick envelope. I opened it right there in the driver's seat. The first report was only 3 pages, but it turned my blood to ice. Dad's Bentley had been tampered with in an extraordinarily sophisticated way. Brake lines partially severed with a laser so they would fail gradually while driving. Airbags disabled by a tiny chip inserted into the central system. No burn marks, no suspicious scratches. The work of a professional who knew exactly how to make murder look like a perfect accident. This was no accident. This was premeditated murder. I sat motionless in the car, hands trembling so hard the pages nearly slipped from my fingers. They had wanted him dead. And that day outside the ER, I had stood there naively believing it was just cruel fate, a tragic twist of life. Marcus sent the second report the following evening via encrypted link, dozens of photos from hidden cameras. Vivian and Kai meeting at least twice a week in a Century City penthouse registered to a shell company controlled by Kai. They walked in hand, stayed 3 or 4 hours, sometimes all night. Photos of them kissing in the private elevator. Of Vivian resting her head on Kai's shoulder on the balcony overlooking the city lights. Completely opposite the cold, distant uncle-stepmother facade they always showed me Dad and the rest of the world. The third report arrived 2 days later, and it destroyed everything I thought I knew. Vivian and Kai had been having an affair for 12 years since she was still Dad's personal assistant, before she ever got pregnant with Miles, before Dad proposed to her on that Amalfi Coast trip he once told me about with rare happiness in his voice. 12 years. Miles was not my father's son. Miles was Kai's. I sat in the on-call room staring at the lines on my laptop screen, feeling as if someone had sucked all the air from my lungs. Suddenly everything was painfully clear. Dad must have discovered the truth probably just weeks before the crash. That was why he had called me to dinner sounding so strange. That was why he had hired investigators. That was why they had to silence him, not just for the money, but because if he spoke, the whole world would know Vivian was an adulteress, Miles was not a legitimate heir, and Kai, the most trusted brother, had been destroying the family from the inside. I drove to the Holmby Hills house for the first time in over a month. The mansion was vast and silent as a tomb. The old butler opened the door, eyes red when he saw me. Vivian wasn't home. She was at a spa in Palm Springs, he said. Good. I didn't want to see her right now. I went straight to Dad's study, the room where he used to spend hours teaching me to read financial reports, the room that still carried the faint scent of the cigars he loved. I knew he kept the most important things in the secondary safe hidden behind Mom's portrait. The combination was their wedding date. The safe opened with a dry click. Inside was only a thin folder. DNA test results from a lab in Switzerland, mailed exactly 5 weeks before the crash. Paternity probability, 99%. Biological father of Miles Ward, Kai Alexander Ward. I sank to the hardwood floor back against Dad's desk, papers scattering around me. I remembered every time Vivian and Kai appeared on the hospital cameras, casually talking about yachts in Monaco, villas in Tuscany, their new life, once the old man is gone. They spoke as if Dad's death was just another administrative step, a door they had to open to finally walk into the paradise they had waited over a decade for. I gathered the papers, locked the safe, and drove off into the night. I needed to see Claudia Ward, Kai's wife, the gentle, elegant woman I had always called Aunt since childhood. She lived in Pasadena in the house Kai rarely visited. I showed up unannounced, nearly midnight. She opened the door in her robe, eyes swollen as if she'd been crying. "Philip, what's wrong? It's so late." I handed her the envelope. "Read this, Aunt Claudia. Then we'll talk." She sat on the living room sofa and motioned for me to sit opposite her. She opened the envelope, skimmed a few lines, and her whole body began to shake. Her face went white. She covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Silent tears fell onto the pages. I suspected," she whispered, voice breaking. "Miles looks so much like Kai. The nose, the chin. I once asked Vivian directly. She laughed and told me I was insane. Kai got furious, said I was insulting their brotherly bond. I had no proof, so I stayed silent. For 11 years I lived with that suspicion, Philip." She looked up at me, eyes red but burning with a resolve I had never seen in her before. "What do you need me to do?" I told her everything. No detail spared. The hidden camera footage, the potassium chloride plan, the attempted murder. Claudia listened, knuckles white around her water glass. The next day, she started moving. She secretly photographed every document in Kai's private office. Hundreds of millions funneled through shell companies in the Caymans, Liechtenstein, Cyprus, handwritten notes about asset division after Alexander is gone. Lists of properties to be transferred to Miles, the boy she now knew for certain was not my father's son. Then one evening, Claudia called me, voice trembling but steady. I have the recording. She had captured an entire encrypted phone call. Kai and Vivian discussing the new drug, this time succinylcholine, a muscle paralytic injected into the vein that would stop his breathing within minutes and leave no trace in standard toxicology. They set the date, the following Friday, when the night shift changed and hospital security was thinnest. I listened to the recording in my car in the hospital parking lot, and for the first time since Mom died, I cried out loud. Not from grief, but because at last I had proof. With every layer peeled back, affair, betrayal, attempted murder, money laundering, I understood I wasn't facing ordinary greed. I was facing two people who had become demons, willing to kill anyone, even blood, to protect their filthy secrets. But they forgot one thing. I am Alexander Ward's son, and Alexander Ward did not raise his son to bow. This time, I will make them kneel. I planned every step, cold, methodical, precise, exactly the way my father had taught me to negotiate a $100 million deal. I met Lawrence Stein, the family's personal attorney, in his private office. The man had been working for Dad since before I was born. I handed him everything. The hospital camera footage, Marcus Hale's investigative reports, the Swiss DNA results, the list of money laundering transfers, and Claudia's final recording. When he finished listening to the segment where Kai and Vivian discussed the succinylcholine, he took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. Philip, this is no longer an inheritance dispute. This is attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and financial fraud. We can put both of them away for life. I nodded. I don't want to wait for a trial. I want them caught red-handed before they try again. Stein looked at me for a long time, then nodded. I'll file emergency applications with the LAPD and the FBI. Surveillance warrants, search warrants, and protective custody for a living witness. Because your father is now the key witness. While we waited for the warrants, Vivian moved first. She immediately called in every political favor she had built up at lavish fundraising galas. The result was terrifyingly fast. The next morning, the chief of medicine called me into his office, his face full of regret. Mrs. Vivian Ward has filed a petition to restrict your visitation rights. She claims you are causing stress to the patient and acting against Mr. Alexander's final wishes, specifically his desire not to be kept on artificial life support. I gave a bitter laugh. Final wishes? Does she have documentation? She has a document signed by Mr. Alexander 8 years ago, and affidavits from 2 independent physicians confirming irreversible vegetative state. I stood up. Forward everything to my attorney. We'll see you in court. But Vivian didn't stop there. That same afternoon, the tabloids exploded. Billionaire Alexander Ward's unfilial son refuses to let father die to monopolize fortune. Philip Ward. Cruel heir or greedy monster? Photos of me secretly taken outside the hospital, eyes ringed with exhaustion, shirt wrinkled, looking like a drug addict. Social media overflowed with comments. Unfilial bastard. Pull the plug and let the man rest. He just wants the money. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old friends texting concern, partners canceling meetings, strangers calling just to curse me out. I turned the phone off, sat by Dad's bed, and dropped my head. I'm so tired, Dad. They're calling me unfilial. They don't know anything. He blinked 3 times in rapid succession, our signal for I love you. Then 2 more slow blinks. Keep going. I looked up, wiped my eyes. I won't give up. For you. That very night, the emergency surveillance and intervention warrants were signed. The operation began. I stayed at the hospital as usual, but this time 4 undercover LAPD officers were posing as security guards. 2 more as nurses, and Stein was waiting in the on-call room. The hidden mini-cameras were still running, streaming live to my phone and directly to the police server. 1:46 a.m. My phone vibrated the emergency alert. I opened the feed. My heart stopped. It was Uncle Kai, dressed head to toe in black, surgical mask pulled high, baseball cap low over his eyes. But I recognized the slightly hunched gait from his herniated disc. He glanced up and down the corridor, knocked 3 soft times, the signal for medical staff. The door opened from inside, an undercover nurse pretending to doze, and he slipped in. I bolted from the on-call room. Stein and 4 officers sprinted behind me. On the monitor, I saw Kai walk straight to the bed. His trembling hand pulled a small unmarked glass vial and a ready syringe from his inner pocket. He leaned over the IV line and whispered something the camera couldn't catch. He removed the needle cap. The needle was inches from the IV port. The door burst open. LAPD. Freeze. Flashlight beams hit Kai's face. He flinched. The syringe clattered to the floor with a metallic ping. 2 officers tackled him, cuffs snapping on in under 3 seconds. Kai thrashed and screamed, "Let me go. I was just visiting my brother. This is a mistake." I stepped into the room and stood between him and Dad's bed. "Visiting with succinylcholine?" I said, my voice so cold I barely recognized it. "Enough to kill an elephant in 3 minutes?" Kai stared at me, eyes bulging, stammering, You're lying. I don't know what you're talking about." An officer picked up the vial and sealed it in an evidence bag. Another turned on the lights and began filming the entire scene. Stein stepped forward with the warrant. "Kai Ward, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and multiple financial crimes. You have the right to remain silent." Kai was dragged out, still shouting his innocence, claiming this was all my plot to seize the fortune. But the cameras had recorded everything, every second, every movement. I turned back to Dad. He lay there, eyes wide open, but the corners were glistening. 1 tear rolled slowly down his temple, then a second, then a third. I took his hand and pressed it to my cheek. "It's over, Dad," I whispered, voice breaking. "I kept my promise. They can't hurt you anymore." The next morning, just as the sun rose over the Holmby Hills, more than a dozen police cars and FBI vehicles descended on the Holmby Hills mansion. I watched it live on the local news. They pounded on the door, read the arrest warrant for Vivian Ward on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and a long list of financial crimes. The cameras captured her being led out of the house in silk pajamas, hair disheveled, no makeup, hands cuffed behind her back. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just stared straight into the lenses with empty eyes, as if she had always known this day would come. Kai, my uncle, had already been in custody since the night before. Now both of them were behind bars. The interrogations that followed were long and brutal. They separated the two, showed them the evidence piece by piece. The hospital camera footage, the DNA results, the money transfer records, Claudia's recordings, the forensic report proving the car had been sabotaged. Kai was the most stubborn. He denied everything, calling it the fabrications of an ungrateful nephew. But when they played Claudia's recording, in which his own voice clearly said, "1 dose of potassium chloride will be enough," he went silent. Vivian broke much faster. On the 5th day, she cried, demanded her lawyer, and then confessed everything. She detailed how the affair with Kai began 12 years earlier when she was still my father's personal assistant. How she got pregnant with Miles and convinced my father the child was his. The plan to eliminate him once he found out, the 6 months spent preparing the accident. And the second plan with poison after every attempt failed because Philip is guarding him too closely. She cried, but not from remorse, from fear. The criminal trial began 3 months later and lasted nearly 8 months, one of the biggest cases Los Angeles had seen in a decade. The press camped outside the courthouse. Social media exploded daily. Each session peeled back another layer of secrets for the world to see. The first murder attempt on the Malibu highway, the potassium chloride plan, the succinylcholine, hundreds of millions laundered through shell companies, abuse of the CFO position to siphon assets, and the climax, the DNA proof that Miles was Kai's son. On sentencing day, the courtroom was packed. The judge, an older woman with an ice-cold voice, read out the charges one by one. First-degree attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, large-scale financial fraud, money laundering, breach of trust. Kai was sentenced first. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or early release. He hung his head, said nothing. The once powerful CFO of a billion-dollar empire was gone. Vivian was next. Accomplice to attempted murder, concealment of evidence, participation in money laundering, fraudulent misrepresentation of a child's parentage for inheritance purposes. 35 years in federal prison, no parole for the first 28 years. She sobbed, but no one felt pity. She was 48. When she was finally released, she would be nearly 80. I sat in the front row beside Claudia. I didn't applaud. I didn't smile. I just sat in silence. Miles did not attend the final day. The 11-year-old had been placed in psychological care the moment the scandal broke. Claudia took temporary custody, and the boy completely collapsed when he learned the truth. A child who once believed he was a billionaire's son now knew he was the product of a filthy affair. He never cried in front of anyone, but every night he cried alone, Claudia told me. I left the courthouse without speaking to reporters, without a statement. I just wanted to get back to Dad. A month later, I received a letter from Chowchilla Federal Prison. "Philip, Mom wants to see you. Just one last time." I went. Vivian was brought into the visiting room. She had become skeletal, hair cropped short, orange prison jumpsuit, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She sat down opposite me, separated by thick glass, picked up the phone with shaking hands, and spoke in a hoarse voice. "Philip, I know I was wrong. I'm sorry." I said nothing. I just looked at her. She lowered her head, tears falling onto the counter. "I know you won't forgive me. I don't expect forgiveness. I only ask one thing. Don't take revenge on Miles. The boy is innocent. He didn't choose his mother. He's just a child." I was silent for a very long time. Then I answered, voice flat. "I will never forgive you, maybe never. But Miles has nothing to do with this. He's suffered enough. I won't hurt him. You can rest easy." She broke into sobs, the receiver trembling in her hand. Before the guard took her away, she whispered into the phone, "Tell Alexander I'm sorry. Even if he can't hear me, tell him I'm sorry." I stood up, set the receiver down, turned, and walked out. The November sunlight outside was cold but crystal clear. I stood in the prison parking lot, took a deep breath, and felt as though a boulder that had been crushing my chest for months had finally been lifted. It was over, not with cheers of victory, not with a vengeful smile. Just with emptiness, the emptiness of someone who has walked out of hell and realized he is still alive. I drove straight to the hospital, took Dad's hand, and whispered, "It's finished, Dad. We won." He blinked twice, slowly, and I knew he was smiling, even if his body still wouldn't let him. Sunlight poured through the window and fell across his face. For the first time in months, he looked as handsome and distinguished as he used to. The rotten past was buried behind us. Ahead, there was only the two of us, father and son. Many months after the trial, once Kai and Vivian had been permanently transferred to two federal prisons hundreds of miles apart, I moved my father to the finest rehabilitation center in California, a private facility in Santa Barbara overlooking the ocean, where the air was so clean and quiet you could hear the waves from miles away. I was there almost every day. I managed the company remotely, held board meetings on my laptop in the corridor, and only left when it was absolutely unavoidable. I sat beside him through every physical therapy session, held his hand while the specialists stretched his rigid muscles, and encouraged him to try to move. The first days were genuinely agonizing for him and for me. He would collapse from exhaustion, sometimes lying motionless with his eyes closed, utterly spent. But I never left his side. Then the tiny positive signs began to appear. First, it was a faint twitch of his right thumb, so slight I would have missed it if I hadn't been holding his hand. I shouted like a child and called the doctor in. He started blinking deliberately, not reflexively anymore. Then his right arm moved a few millimeters. Each microscopic improvement brought tears to my eyes. I had to step into the hallway to wipe them away so he wouldn't see. 2 months later, on a radiant spring morning, he sat up for the first time. 2 therapists supported him while I stood directly in front of the bed, arms outstretched, ready to catch him if he fell. He trembled, sweat pouring down his face, but he did it. He sat upright, looked straight at me, and in his eyes I saw a spark I had long stopped daring to hope for. I dropped to my knees in front of the wheelchair, wrapped my arms around him, and cried like I had never cried before. A few weeks later, he stood between parallel bars. Then he walked with a 4-point cane, each step shaky and slow but growing steadier every day. I walked beside him, supporting his elbow, whispering, "One more step, Dad. That's it. You've got this." The day he made his first sound, the entire center felt like it exploded with joy. It was an afternoon session. He was practicing speech in front of a mirror with the language therapist. He struggled to move his lips, and a hoarse, distorted "Phi" came out, unmistakably my name. I was standing outside the door. When I heard it, I burst in like a madman and threw my arms around him. He tried again. "Philip, son." I sobbed uncontrollably like a little boy, my head buried in his shoulder. He patted my back very weakly, but it was the first pat he had given me in over a year of being imprisoned inside his own body. My father was coming back little by little. After 8 months of relentless work, he was discharged. I took him to the family ranch in Ojai, a lush green valley 2 hours north of Los Angeles that he had bought in his youth as a weekend retreat. Fresh air, orange groves heavy with fruit, nothing but birdsong and wind. I hired 2 live-in nurses, but I still visited every weekend, sometimes staying for the whole week. He loved sitting on the porch at sunset with a glass of fresh orange juice, talking to me in short sentences, his voice still rough but clearer every day. We never mentioned Kai or Vivian again. We only talked about the future, new projects, life. One autumn morning, Ward Industries called an extraordinary shareholders meeting. I helped Dad into the main boardroom on the top floor of the downtown tower. He wore a navy suit, leaned on his cane, and walked slowly but steadily. When the doors opened, the entire board, more than 30 people, rose to their feet and applauded without stopping. Some wiped away tears. My father, the man they had thought would never return, was standing there, alive, strong, and smiling. He took the chairman's seat one last time. His voice was still slightly hoarse, but loud enough for the whole room to hear. "After 40 years, I am officially retiring, and I am handing full control of the company to my son, Philip Ward." Not a single objection. They stood and applauded again, not just because I was the legitimate heir, but because they had watched me run the company while Dad lay in the hospital. Transparently, decisively, without a single stain. From that day forward, Ward Industries turned a new page. I dismantled every trace of Kai's legacy. The shell companies, the shady investments, the toxic relationships. I brought the company back to the core values my father had built. Integrity, social responsibility, green energy, sustainable real estate. Old employees whispered that the company had its soul back. Claudia became an indispensable ally. She helped me comb through every last figure Kai had left behind, pointing out holes only she knew existed. We worked side by side for months, and from that grew a deep mutual respect, not romance, but the understanding of 2 people who had been betrayed by the same family. Miles was enrolled in intensive psychological counseling. I met him a few times in the therapist's office. He had grown thin, his eyes always red, but he no longer cried in front of me. I told him he was not at fault, that he would always be my little brother if he wanted to be. I covered all his tuition and therapy costs and promised I would always be there if he needed me. He didn't say much, just nodded. But I know time will heal him. Watching Dad on the porch at sunset, watching the company flourish under my hands, seeing Miles begin to smile again in the photos Claudia sent me, I felt it clearly. I was stepping into a completely new chapter. No more darkness, no more betrayal, no more sleepless nights filled with fear. Only what I had fought my whole life to protect. my father, my family, and the integrity he had taught me since I was a child. One afternoon, Dad sat beside me, orange juice in hand, his voice now much clearer. "You did well, Philip. I'm proud of you." I took his hand and smiled. "I only did what you taught me." He nodded, eyes fixed on the endless orange groves, and I knew no matter what the future held, I had kept the most important thing of all: my father. For the first time in my life, everything felt light. I still ran Ward Industries at full intensity, but now everything carried a different meaning. I was no longer cleaning up wreckage. I was building. Renewable energy projects, affordable housing for low-income families, scholarship funds in my mother's name. All of them were moving forward beautifully. And then I met Ava. She was the legal counsel for a solar energy conglomerate in San Francisco we were partnering with. The first time we met in the boardroom, she walked in wearing a charcoal gray suit, hair in a high ponytail, eyes bright, and a smile just warm enough to melt the icy atmosphere of the room. She was razor-sharp, confident but never arrogant, the kind of person who could read a 200-page contract, spot every loophole in 5 minutes, and then softly laugh, "Don't worry, we can fix this." What started as business slowly turned into something more. Work emails stretched into late-night texts, weekend coffees, then nameless dinners. Ava never pried into my past. She simply listened when I wanted to talk and stayed quiet when I didn't. She brought a kind of peace I had never known. No judgment, no calculation, just presence. I fell in love with her because she made me laugh again. We married 6 months later on an autumn afternoon at the Ojai Ranch with only a few dozen close friends and family. Dad sat in the front row, beaming with the brightest smile I had seen since his recovery. Ava wore a simple white dress, nothing extravagant, and when she said "I do," I knew I had finally found my harbor. A year later, we welcomed our first son, Alexander Caroline Ward, a name that carried both my father and my mother. He was born on a spring morning, crying loudly, gripping my finger with his tiny fist. I cried right there in the delivery room, unable to hide it. Every weekend, I drove Ava and the baby back to the ranch. Dad would be waiting on the porch, cane in hand but eyes shining the moment he heard the car. He held his grandson, arms still weak, and sang the same hoarse lullabies he once sang to me. The baby giggled in his grandfather's arms, and as I watched them, it felt as though every old wound dissolved in that laughter. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. Dad grew weaker, but peacefully so. He no longer used a cane, only a wheelchair, yet his mind remained sharp. He still read the paper every morning, still asked about the company, still smiled when his grandson ran circles around the orange trees. One late autumn afternoon, the air crisp and the maple leaves blazing red, he called me into his room. He was lying in bed, but his eyes were clear. "Sit here, son." I sat beside him and took his hand as I had so many times before. He pulled a thick envelope from the nightstand and handed it to me. "Everything that's left, the ranch, the charitable trusts, the preferred shares, I'm leaving to you and your son. You've earned it." I started to protest, but he raised a hand to stop me. "Let me finish. I don't have much time left. I only want to tell you one thing. Live kindly, live courageously, and never lose your backbone. Power comes and goes, money does too. But character, only you decide whether to keep it or throw it away." I nodded, tears rolling down my cheeks. "Yes, Dad. I promise I'll live by your words." He smiled and closed his eyes for a moment. "Good. I'm tired now. Let me sleep a little." That night he slipped away quietly in his sleep. No pain, no machines, no tubes. Just a long sleep from which he never woke. The news spread quickly. Ward Industries flew flags at half-mast. The media reported it with solemn respect. Thousands sent condolences. But for me, it was the deepest loss since Mom died. I sat beside his casket all night, holding his hand one last time, whispering that I had kept my promise. The funeral was simple yet dignified, held at the private cemetery on the Ojai hillside. No brass bands, no press, only the people who truly loved him. Old employees, longtime partners, the poor he had quietly helped sent wreaths of white flowers. Claudia came with Miles, now grown taller, eyes red but standing straight. Ava held my hand. Our son placed a bouquet of white roses on his grandfather's grave. When everyone had left, I stood alone before the headstone. The wind moved through the pines, carrying the scent of dry leaves and earth. I remembered everything. The nights the cameras recorded venomous whispers, the courtroom days soaked in blood and tears. Dad's first tears when he realized he was locked inside his body. The long journey that brought him back from the edge of death. And his final smile as he held his grandson. All those events, in the end, led to one clear truth. The truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deeply it is buried. Greed only buries those who chase it. I knelt before the stone, placed my hand on the cold marble, and said, "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for teaching me how to be a man. Power can be stolen, wealth can be betrayed, but character and integrity, no one can take those away. I will live in a way that honors you, and I will."